Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Happy Monday, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and today we are seeing the aftermath of the speaker fight. So that is a top story today. And I also want to get to analysis of the Brunson versus Adams case. Of course, that was the gentleman out of Utah that sued the members of Congress that failed to investigate the results of the 2020 election. So that was kicked out of the Supreme Court today. And, unlike a lot of people, I actually thought that decision was absolutely correct from the Supreme Court. So we're going to talk about that. But first, I had Marjorie Taylor Greene on my new radio show this morning. If you haven't tuned into that, it is at 8 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Central on the American Family Radio Network. It's at afr.net, called Jenna Ellis in the Morning. You can see your local radio station that you can tune in, or you can always listen online via the free app or online on the website. And you can also catch it after on the replay at afr.net. So Marjorie Taylor Greene joined me because there's been a lot of speculation around her motivations for championing and supporting Speaker McCarthy. And I wanted to give her an opportunity to explain, because I personally do not think that the rhetoric of disagreeing with one member of Congress who has been so pro-America First policy, has been very conservative in every single other action, for one decision that's not a moral decision, it's not an unconstitutional decision, it's simply a wisdom decision. It's not wrong for Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker. It's not immoral. It's not unconstitutional. It's simply a matter of wisdom. And so for disagreeing with her and others that have been stalwart conservatives on one decision, now calling her a rhino and saying that she's sold out and she's a sellout and she's a shill and you don't support her, I think that that is being completely unfair, unreasonable, and ridiculous. So this is what Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say. And if you want to listen to the full show, again, go to afr.net. But listen to this.
I'm doing great. I tell you, one good perspective for us to all start on is Nancy Pelosi no longer holds the gavel. Republicans are in control, and we are so ready to get to work.
Excellent. And, you were one of the original people who supported Congressman Kevin McCarthy, and you had said very publicly, you said on my podcast about 6 weeks ago, that you were supporting him. Tell people who are concerned about whether or not he's going to be conservative enough, have some other questions, why you supported him then, and you think that the American people and the GOP base should support him now.
Well, early on, it was very easy for me to see the writing on the wall. I only operate in reality. And that's what I was trying to be upfront with everyone about in the beginning. You see, the makeup of our conference, and, out of 222 Republican members of Congress, we don't have enough conservatives to elect a conservative speaker. Anyone that lives in a Democrat district understands this. If you don't have enough Republican votes, you can't elect a Republican representative. If you don't have enough conservative members of Congress, you can't elect a true conservative, very, America First, MAGA type speaker. It's just the votes aren't there. And so I was honest with everyone all along when, unfortunately, some of my friends and colleagues were misleading people and saying, they were going down this never Kevin road. The other thing for me is I'm tired of the Republican Party being the party of never, because that hurt President Trump so much. And it hurt our agenda that we truly believed in, simply because people went against him because they did not like him. So I always take the personality off the table. I don't believe in any job being about a person or a personality, whether you like them or don't like them. It was very simple for me. There was an agenda there that I could support. And I also spent, the past year going and meeting with Kevin McCarthy and talking to him about his agenda and talking to him about how he felt on all kinds of issues. And so when it came time for us when we won the majority, which thank God we did, it's the only Republican majority we have in the federal government, it was easy for me to make that decision of, yes, of course I'm going to support Kevin McCarthy, because guess what else, Jenna? This is the one point that got highlighted big time that a lot of upset conservatives are missing. The very fight they saw on the House floor this past week, guess what? That can happen on any bill. And I would rather wage fights like that on key pieces of legislation, very important spending bills, or any type of resolution that we pass in the House. I would rather put the energy and the fire and the fight into doing the right thing versus making it about never someone. And so we have 222 Republican members of Congress. We have to have 218 to pass anything. And so we got to get Republicans on page. Let's make sure that we fight the right fight instead of fighting a person.
And I'm speaking with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you make a good point in terms of fighting the fights that need to be fought. But is that mutually exclusive? Because there are some people who are saying, well, this is a fight that needed to happen. But also there are people who are saying that because the fight for Speaker happened, that really broke the conference in terms of a lot of the more moderates, that now it's going to be more difficult to fight things moving forward. So has the fight for Speaker changed the dynamic in terms of being able to fight the fights on the legislation and the agenda that you're talking about?
Well, I also think that's a good question. I really wish they had not pushed it so far, because they do have the other side pretty upset, and that's the way it works. They pushed it so far and it was unnecessary. Let me get into the details there. The rules package was already there. The only true changes they got was motion to vacate went from 5 members of Congress to 1 member. That was the one true change. But that was also unnecessary because, again, last week they were proving that it was easy to get at least 5 or more to vacate the chair. They were preemptively vacating it before Kevin McCarthy was even elected. So that was a minor detail. There are things I do like in the rules package. I like the 12 separate appropriation bills. But guess what? That in meetings before we even got anywhere near last week, Kevin McCarthy was already talking about that. He was asking people. He was asking everyone, how do you guys want to do this? Do you want to do 12 separate appropriation bills? Do you want to do several small packages? Do you want to do one? He was completely open to hearing what everybody wanted and was talking about it with everyone. So it's kind of unfair. I think Kevin McCarthy has been attacked so hard that people don't truly know the real conversations that took place. Unfortunately, that's because some people did a lot of fundraising off of last week. Simply being never Kevin seemed to be the fight that they picked. But, going forward, we have to vote on the rules package tonight. And there was already a tweet that came out last week saying that, I think it was Anthony Gonzalez from Texas saying he wouldn't vote for the rules package. Some of the moderates feel like the conservatives pushed so far that it pushed it to places they didn't want to go. And again, I think that's a problem too. The same way I think the speaker fight went on too long, I think voting against the rules is silly too. Because again, everyone needs to get focused on the real issue, the political reality. Come into political reality. Get out of your feelings. We have Joe Biden in the White House. We have a Democrat-controlled Senate. It's not like we can pass major legislative changes and Joe Biden is going to sign them into law. That is not going to happen. But what we can do is use the power of our voting cards, and that's what each of us have, to work out the details to get the 218 on every single thing we do. And that is, that's what I do like that happened, Jenna, is the American people got to see that happen on camera. Like it happened all week long on camera. And I do think that was productive. I think a lot of voters needed to see a fight. They want to see people fighting for what they think is right. Unfortunately, to me, I saw a little deeper into it, is the fight didn't need to go on that long because there were some members of Congress there that were really suffering because of it. Roger Williams' wife had a stroke, and she was in the hospital, and he couldn't go home to be with his wife. Wesley Hunt, his wife had a baby 4 weeks premature, and the baby was in the hospital, and then his wife had to go back into the hospital. Kevin Hearn's mother passed away, and everything was being delayed at home because of the speaker fight. There were multiple members of Congress with emergencies and family issues that needed to go home, and that had tensions and emotions extremely high when we had, a handful of Republicans holding things up when they had nothing else to get but like subcommittee chair positions or something for themselves. And
talk about it being personal at that point. I mean, and that does make it a lot more personal for people who have family emergencies and, reasons to get home. And I'm talking with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. And, you mentioned that the people do like to see a fight and they like to see democracy on display in our constitutional republic. And I think people forget that even with a Republican majority, it's a slim majority, and not all Republicans vote in a block like the Democrats do. And so do you see this type of fracturing into these different coalitions within the Republican Party of the Never Kevins and some of those versus some of the more moderate Republicans that wouldn't ever elect someone like a Jim Jordan to speaker? Do you see people coming together now and actually working together, getting the rules package passed, and Kevin McCarthy following through on his word to the concessions that he made, or is he going to have to change that now because of some of the moderates that are upset?
Well, we're all just coming back into town today. We elected Kevin McCarthy very, very late in the night on Saturday morning actually, and so we haven't all come back together yet. What I've heard is I think it's going to pass. I think there's been some talks with anyone that's still holding up the rules package, but I think it's going to pass. I hope it does. Jenna, here's what I really think: the American people are so sick and tired of drama in Washington, and I am just as angry as they are. And this whole reason why I ran for Congress is I absolutely hate what Congress has done to the American people. I do think that there is someone that needs to be held accountable, but I think a lot of the vitriol and anger got focused on Kevin McCarthy when it should be heavily focused on Mitch McConnell. That's the one, people were basically, it was like pitchforks and torches wanting someone's head on a platter. And it shouldn't have been Kevin McCarthy's. He didn't pass the $1.7 trillion horrific omnibus. That was Mitch McConnell that did that made a deal with the Democrats and delivered Biden's agenda. We couldn't stop it. Kevin McCarthy, he whipped against it. He fought everyone, told them do not vote for it. But he literally can't control people's voting cards. We had a handful that voted for it. unfortunately. But the Democrats still could have passed it, even if every Republican voted against it, because that was before we took over. So I think, to me, I believe there's something coming up, and I think it should be a key issue in this race. The RNC chair, the race to be chair of the RNC. I think there should be a conversation, and if there's a debate, I think every single candidate should be asked, what are you going to do about Mitch McConnell? Because Mitch McConnell doesn't have an election coming up real soon, but he is the biggest enemy that we have in the Republican Party. I think people need to give Kevin McCarthy a chance because, like I said, we have a razor-thin majority. Kevin, people are going to be surprised. They're going to be shocked when they find out that he's not the terrible, scary rhino that they've been told he is.
Time to make your health great again as we get closer to the new year. For anyone looking to ignite your fat-burning metabolism, boost your energy, and transform how you look and feel, you must start taking care of your liver now. Your liver is your body's master detoxifier. It performs over 500 key functions in your body every day. It's responsible for cleansing and removing thousands of harmful toxins, man-made chemicals, alcohol, and dangerous food additives and preservatives. After decades of wear and tear, our livers slow down and become sluggish. And this is why so many of us struggle with weight gain and feeling tired all of the time. So fortunately, there is a simple, all-natural solution that I absolutely recommend. It's called Liver Health Formula. Liver Health Formula contains 12 powerful botanicals clinically proven to recharge and protect your liver at the cellular level. It also helps restore your liver's detoxifying abilities, boost your energy levels, and you can kick your natural metabolism into high gear. So Liver Health Formula is backed by science and approved by American doctors. Every bottle is also manufactured right here in America too. So as of right now, as a listener to the Jenna Ellis Show, you can try Liver Health Formula completely risk-free and receive 5 free gifts when you order today. First, you'll receive a free 30-day supply of nano-powered omega-3. This is a powerful blend of omega-3 fatty acids that supports a healthy heart and brain, with 4 times better absorption thanks to this special nano delivery system. You'll also get 4 free ebooks to support every aspect of your health and longevity, regardless of your age. So go to getliverhelp.com/Jenna or call toll-free at 800-282-1757 to claim your risk-free supply of Liver Health Formula and all 5 bonus gifts. That's getliverhelp.com/Jenna or call 1-800-282-1757. You're covered by their 365-day money-back guarantee, so you have nothing at all to risk. But supplies are limited, so head over to getliverhelp.com/Jenna or call toll-free 800-282-1757 now to order Liver Health Formula and get your 5 free bonus gifts. That's getliverhelp.com/Jenna or call 1-800-282-1757. And joining me now to discuss further is my good friend Joel Pollak, who is the senior editor at large for Breitbart, and who also had a piece in Breitbart, shockingly, right, that says Breitbart News' editor at large Joel Pollak recently appeared on Fox 11 in Los Angeles to discuss the latest battle in Congress over the next Republican Speaker of the House, which Pollak termed, quote, a disaster for Republicans. So, Joel, there's been a lot of controversy over this. A lot of people on, kind of the deep red MAGA side saying this was a great display of democracy. This could have gone on even longer. And then there were people like you, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and others that said this was kind of a waste of time. And the rules package that they're going to debate on the floor tonight actually didn't get us anywhere. If anything, it more stalled the process because now legislation can be blocked from moving by just one member moving to vacate the chair. So I think there's a lot of good opinions on both sides. What say you?
Well, the battle is over, and there's a compromise that allowed Kevin McCarthy to be elected as Speaker and allowed these rules changes. So each side in this fight got something of what they wanted. Now they have to put those differences aside and move forward. But I would argue that the rules package that they will adopt, if they adopt it, is weak, and it's vulnerable to attack from the very forces that the rebel factions say they are trying to oppose. If you allow one member, for example, to propose a motion to vacate the Speaker's chair, then it's not just conservatives that can use that power. It's liberal Republicans, so-called rhinos. it's Democrats, it's the squad, it's AOC. Now, the speaker has a little bit more control over what motions come to the floor, but basically they've put a grenade pin under the speaker's chair, and it just takes one member to pull it. And then we're right back in this situation of trying to find a speaker. So it is a double-edged sword that they've fashioned. They claim that they've strengthened the caucus vis-a-vis the speaker. Well, maybe that's the right solution for the other side of the Capitol, where Mitch McConnell has unquestioned authority over his Republican caucus. He faced very limited opposition, even though he has lost now 2 Senate elections in a row. You can blame other people for that. You can blame candidates, as he tried to do. You can blame Donald Trump, as others have tried to do. But regardless, he's had 2 straight losing elections. No Republican incumbents lost their seats in this last cycle. Only Pennsylvania flipped because Pat Toomey retired. But still, he has had opportunities to retain control or gain control of the Senate and has failed. He's now the longest serving Senate leader in the history of the country. And he's got some accomplishments to look back on. But the question is, what have you done for me lately? You know, here in Los Angeles, they're thinking about firing the head coach of the LA Rams, even though he won the Super Bowl last year, because he's had a dismal season. It's not what you did a couple of years ago. It's what you're doing now. What direction are you taking people in? So there needs to be greater dissent in the Senate, but the House has too much of it. Kevin McCarthy has been around for a while, but he hasn't been speaker yet. In fact, when he was floated as a candidate several years ago, he stepped back and did not run for speaker. So he's actually deferred to others. Now he's finally got a chance. He was elected on a conservative agenda. People call him a rhino, a globalist, all this kind of thing. I think that sort of labeling might apply to some of the members of the House, but I don't think it applies to him. He's not a firebrand conservative, but he's backing some very conservative members as committee chairs. That's where a lot of the action is going to happen. People like Jim Jordan, for example, James Comer. And I think he has earned a chance to prove himself. I don't see the point of this fight when you've been elected on an agenda that's conservative, that's about opposing the Biden administration, enforcing the border, stopping the crazy spending, holding oversight hearings into the Bidens and their corruption. And you can't do that, at least you can't do it effectively, when you've got all these internal squabbles going on. So they wasted a week. They've lost a week. Maybe you can gain back that time, I guess. But the message it sends to voters is that this Republican majority failed the first test. They did not do on day one what they promised voters they would do on day one. Instead, day one was spent squabbling over who would hold the speaker's gavel. And the rebels, led by Matt Gaetz, now say they did a wonderful job because they reduced the number of members needed to vacate the chair from 5 down to 1. 5 is pretty small. 1 is nothing. I mean, 1 is basically anarchy, potentially. The only thing that'll hold the caucus together is some sense that they have an opponent that's worth fighting in unison. So if Biden is doing something egregiously bad, they'll all band together. And if there's some legislative priority, in the past it's been tax cuts, right? That's the only thing that's really united the Republican caucus. There are issues that are of pressing concern that Kevin McCarthy promised to deliver on, like the border, where there are 1 or 2 members at least in the Republican caucus who don't want a border wall, who don't want more enforcement. They want what the left calls comprehensive immigration reform. They want amnesty, and they're going to hold out against Republican legislation. If you want to get some of these things done, you've got to have a strong speaker, not a weak speaker, because whatever comes from the Senate is going to be passed by Democrats and approved by Mitch McConnell. And you want a strong caucus on the House side that can stand up to that. Most of these policy decisions were already made. They were baked into the cake when voters went to the polls. They knew they were choosing Kevin McCarthy. So this idea that the rebel caucus somehow achieved great changes that weren't there already, I don't know where they're getting that, and I think they've actually weakened their own cause.
Well, you raised some really excellent points. And, a lot of people are seeing this 1-member motion to vacate as a huge win because that will keep Kevin McCarthy basically on a hair trigger. But I have heard, and what you're saying as well, is that there is some tension in that because you could have some moderate Republicans who don't like, for example, the border package. And so they motion to vacate the chair just for purposes of stifling that type of legislation and not really having meaningful debate. So where do you think, though, that accountability could have come from if not with this type of rules package or without the 20 that built a coalition that are standing up and telling Kevin McCarthy, listen, we don't want you to be Mitch McConnell. And granted, he hasn't been in leadership before in this sense. He hasn't been speaker before. And so we'll give him a little bit more, well, we'll see what your promises ultimately result in, rather than the Mitch McConnell that we know what we're getting and we know that we don't like him. But I think for a lot of people, they're very concerned that McCarthy wouldn't have been accountable and they would have had, he would have had too broad of leadership. So in your mind, if not this, then how else could the 20 have achieved accountability that I think the base really desires?
Well, I think there is accountability already in the House Republican caucus for many purposes. It's not perfect. There are things that they've done that I've strongly disagreed with. For example, in the last Congress, they took a secret vote in the caucus to allow the reinstatement of earmarks. The fight against earmarks was a really important battle that the Tea Party waged and won a decade ago. So to see the caucus backslide on that, I think is very bad. That's not just Kevin McCarthy's fault. That's the fault of some of the conservatives or maybe even some of the rebels. We don't know even who voted for it because it was a secret ballot. They won't tell us. So, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on that's wrong. But there is accountability in the form of leadership elections. And the fact is that the rebel faction ran against Kevin McCarthy in the most recent leadership elections. They lost, and then they decided to use their temporary leverage at this speaker's election to try to win what they lost in the internal process. There's accountability in the case of Liz Cheney, for example, now former member of Congress, Liz Cheney. She voted to impeach Donald Trump.
Which, yay, right. We can all applaud that.
She voted to impeach President Donald Trump, or then former President Trump. And she was voted back into leadership by a narrow margin, which tells you that the caucus wasn't punishing her for that vote. But then when she went in for the January 6th committee, she was pushed out of leadership. That was the accountability. That was going too far. So there is a process of accountability. I think that if all you have is accountability, you don't have responsibility. You don't have any authority. You don't have anyone who can actually carry things out because everybody's too afraid to move. And again, all it takes is someone like Fred Upton, for example, or, in a previous Congress, it would have been Justin Amash to stand up and say, hey, I don't like this thing that they're doing. And it would have just thrown wrenches into the works all over the place. One of the reasons Democrats like Nancy Pelosi is that she got things done. Now, I think what she got done was terrible. And I don't even think any of it is going to be something future generations look back on with any kind of pride. Nothing really important for the country, except a lot of spending and a lot of decay. But she united their caucus, and the squad, even though they didn't like being controlled, they went along with it because they knew they were going to get most of what they wanted, and they did. So the rebel faction here is playing a game where they're posturing as the keepers of the flame, and they are supposedly holding Kevin McCarthy's feet to the fire. But if that's all they're doing, they're making him weaker. They need the House caucus to stand strong against the Senate. There are some very, very big fights coming up. There are fights over the debt ceiling. There are fights over spending. There are fights over all kinds of things. And McCarthy is not going to be able to manage the caucus if he has to worry about making one member upset, because you need some flexibility. You need to be able to give a little bit of room for dissent. They've eliminated that. Basically, they now need unanimity. And, that's not the way politics works. People are not going to agree on everything.
And definitely not Republicans. Yeah, which is a good thing.
And look, there is a process of determining the leadership, of determining the platform. Kevin McCarthy ran on strengthening the border, holding oversight hearings, cutting the spending, or at least stopping the growth of the spending the way it's been going. I don't think anybody trusts Congress actually to cut spending, but at least stopping the crazy spending. A lot of what the rebels say they want has either been tried in the past, this wonderful 72-hour rule. I love that idea of putting legislation up and giving members 72 hours to read it. They tried that when the Tea Party won. Unfortunately, there are all kinds of circumstances where it doesn't happen, and there's no recourse, right? So you could say they're trying to demand accountability for that, but it's such a bogus promise because it's just broken, and it has sometimes nothing to do with the House. Sometimes it has to do with the way the Senate's done things, and you run out of time, and there is no time to read what they've handed over. I think there ought to be smaller bills on individual pieces of legislation. So there are some silver linings here. I mean, there are some things that the rebels might have achieved that could turn out for the best. But I think overall, they're going to strengthen the establishment. I mean, all Mitch McConnell has to do is say, look at that circus over there in the House. We're going to do things my way. We're going to keep things orderly. We're going to keep things stable. We're not going to rock the boat. I think they've hurt their ability to get policy goals done by holding this confrontation that was contrived in a way that boosted the profiles of the people leading it without really achieving much in policy terms and maybe making Republican policies more vulnerable to attack.
Well, so as they vote on the rules package tonight, do you anticipate that McCarthy will hold to these concessions, or are the 20 going to have to coalesce, or are they going to give any at all when they've had significant pushback from a lot of the media commentators, but certainly a lot of the 200 plus that supported McCarthy?
I don't know.
originally?
There are some signs that some of the moderate Republicans don't like the rules package. Who knows what's going to happen? But we've seen some rumblings of that already. This might be the chance for the moderate Republicans to start throwing wrenches into the works and saying, I don't like this. I don't like what Matt Gaetz imposed on us. I don't think this is going to work. So they might not pass the rule package. I mean, this is a Pandora's box they've opened. I think they're going to need to go back and revise some of this stuff. If not now, then later when it bites them in the butt, when, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez decides it's time for Kevin McCarthy to go, and you have enough Republicans who are absent that day that the Democrats can win a majority vote on that. I mean, it's really going to be problematic. You need some sort of coherence. The other thing I'd say is that if conservatives really want to hold Congress accountable, look at examples where that's been done successfully. And where it's happened successfully are where there are institutions outside of Congress that are very strong, that can push for particular issues, and that can push policies and that can, frankly, control money that can help candidates who stick to that agenda. Look at the lobbying for gun rights. Look at the Club for Growth, for example, which had a huge influence on this internal battle. I mean, they had some sway. I think the place where conservatives need to continue putting emphasis is on institutions that are political, but that are outside of government. And what conservatives really need are some more conservative billionaires to start doing what the left-wing billionaires do, and to start funding think tanks, to start funding activist organizations, to put more money into conservative media, because the left is spending a vast amount of money on changing the entire media, cultural, political landscape in their favor simply by investing in themselves outside of politics. And of course, they control government institutions as well. They control the big public sector unions. So they already have an inbuilt advantage, and yet they're also building these outside institutions. Conservatives aren't doing that enough yet. I mean, there are some very successful examples, but it's not happening to the scale that Democrats are doing it. And so I would say to the rebels, if you really want accountability, yes, do your thing in Congress, but also make sure that you're working with institutions outside of Congress to make sure that there's a broader conservative network that's supporting what you're trying to do. So I think that's the way this has to go in the long run. There's not much the House can do alone. There's not even much a Congress, even if it were controlled by both, even if both houses were controlled by Republicans, there's not much you can do when you don't have the White House as well. So this is, in a way, setting the stage for the presidential election of 2024 and seeing which candidates can emerge. I think that Donald Trump was, interestingly, on the side of stability here by endorsing Kevin McCarthy and making some phone calls in the last few hours and so forth to sway some votes. I think he had an impact, and I would argue a positive impact. The issue is that Democrats have now been able to come away from this saying, well, this is the chaos that Trump inspired in the party, because even though he didn't support the rebels, many of them are Trump supporters who supported him. And this is reflective of what happens when Donald Trump is involved in Republican politics. I don't think that's fair, but that's what they're going to say. And I think the rebels, unfortunately, made that case easier to make simply by creating chaos. The questions in 2024 are really going to be about not only who can achieve what the country needs doing, such as enforcing the border. I mean, you saw Joe Biden making his first ever visit to the border in 50 years. And what does he choose for his backdrop, for his photo op? The fence, the wall, so to speak, that he didn't want to build. I mean, so
big, beautiful
it's
wall.
obvious that the country understands the importance of border security, even if Democrats pretend not to. Who's going to get that done? But also, who's going to bring a sense of stability back to our politics? Joe Biden promised that he would unify the country. He's one of the most divisive presidents we've ever had. He continues to insult and attack the opposition. He's a nasty person when he's confronted. There's no magnanimity in the man. He's allowed his party to persecute and prosecute Trump and his supporters to an unbelievable degree that's not only been unfair and divisive, but has also damaged our institutions. So I think the country's going to look for somebody who can pull us out of that. Donald Trump can in his best moments. There may be other contenders who say that they're the best to do it as well.
Yeah, well, as someone who has been personally targeted by the Biden administration, I would fully agree with that. And it is bringing down our institutions and our professions as well. If it's something that is as divisive as viewpoint politics or simply the name or the party of the person that you represent, and that can be the basis to disbar attorneys or for prosecutions or other things, then we've lost our ability to truly be independent and to have these institutions allow for debate and disagreement. And so the last question I have for you, Joel, as we're moving forward and setting the stage for the 2024 election, Joe Biden came out recently and said that he anticipates he will announce his reelection as early as next month or possibly in April, if he can remember the name of the month. Obviously he thought that January was July. I mean, for a lot of us, I honestly didn't anticipate Joe Biden staying in office even as long as he has, with the clear mental deficiencies that he has. He would be, I think, 86 by the time that he would complete a second term. I mean, is this even feasible? What are the Democrats thinking?
Well, two things happened that made it more likely that he'll be the nominee. One is his party did better than expected in the midterm elections. There are all kinds of explanations for why that happened, but had he been more unfortunate, had the Democrats lost the Senate and had they lost by a wider margin in the House, then I think the argument for Biden stepping down as the candidate would have been a lot stronger. The other problem the Democrats have, or the other reason Biden is likely to run again, is that there's no alternative. Kamala Harris is a terrible candidate. She's a terrible vice president. Pete Buttigieg, who's the other person who's trying to make himself the heir apparent to Joe Biden, is a total disaster. You have one transportation snafu after another on his watch. This is the Harvard guy, the McKinsey guy, the best and the brightest. He can't even keep trains running on time. So he looks like a complete buffoon. And who else is there? They don't have a bench. They don't have any governors that can point to what they've done in their states and say, hey, we succeeded. I mean, Gavin Newsom, my governor here in California, just got reelected. And he's making a national name for himself the way he always has, by pushing divisive cultural issues. Remember, when he was mayor of San Francisco, he was the first to allow gay marriages of any kind by any government authority in the country. Now it's an everyday occurrence, but when he was doing it in San Francisco, it was a new thing. That's what he's always done. So now he goes to Florida and makes ads about transgender people. He claims that Republicans are opposed to Mickey Mouse because they are and ought to be opposed to Disney taking sides in cultural issues and Disney pushing for sexual education for kids younger than third grade. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, it just defies common sense. But Newsom's out there and he's pushing all these cultural issues. He can't point to one thing he's done in California. He has no track record. He got reelected. That's not hard to do if you're a Democrat here. He has achieved nothing except putting the state on a road to higher energy prices and electricity shortages. We've got rain coming down here outside my window, and we don't have reservoirs to store the water, so we might get out of this drought, but the next drought is just another winter away. And, he just hasn't done anything. So who do they have who they can point to and say, this is a person who's made a mark, this is a person who's led, who's done something? Nobody. Donald Trump wasn't in politics.
What do you think about Jared Polis out of Colorado? That name has been floated around, and especially with the legislation that's just been put forward on gun control, which is patently and absurdly unconstitutional. But, he's someone that's a former member of Congress. He's done a reasonably adequate job on even a moderate scale in Colorado. I'm not a fan, but he's certainly no Gavin Newsom. What about someone like him?
It's interesting you mention him because he's the only person I also would have named who they might have thought of. I haven't been impressed by him on the national stage. When he was in Congress, he was a left-wing radical, came back to Colorado, ran for governor, and has governed in a more moderate fashion. The best thing he did was open his state up early. When other Democrats were keeping their economies closed, he opened Colorado the same time Republican governors were doing it. And that may be because he knows he has a purple or purple-ish state, and he is a more moderate candidate. I don't think he has the leadership qualities to be a viable candidate for president. Whenever I've seen him on the national stage, he's just underwhelmed me. So that could change. People do improve their skills and so forth, and they have a different persona when they become national figures. I just don't think the Democrats have an alternative to Biden. That's the issue. Is Jared Polis going to run against Joe Biden and win? I don't think so. So I think that they're stuck with Biden, and they can win with him if Republicans don't pull it together. That was my objection to the circus, really, which is what I called it, in the speaker's election. I think Republicans have to get serious about governing. And I think more important than that, Republicans can no longer allow their party, or I should say our party, since I'm a Republican, we can no longer allow the party to be controlled by the most audacious element. That is to say, just because you're willing to do something crazy to win doesn't mean you should be allowed to lead the party in your direction. And so you've got all these little factions pulling in different directions, each trying to do something daring. And you have to admire the fight and the spirit, but there also needs to be an agenda. There needs to be a program. We need to be marching in the same direction. And I think that the party suffers today because some people took matters into their own hands on January 6th, 2021. I think it suffered last week because some people decided that they didn't like the internal leadership elections and they wanted to elect their own leaders, use the speaker's vote as a way of foisting new leadership on the caucus. I think that's got to stop because I think it's bad for the party. It makes things look disorderly. It adds an element of uncertainty that's even greater than what Donald Trump brought. I mean, Donald Trump was a disruptive presence, I think, in a positive way. This is negative disruption. This is just, in some cases, disruption for disruption's sake. And I get where it comes from for some people. They're so tired of watching the establishment ruin everything. But again, the House is not necessarily the servant of the Republican establishment. This is not John Boehner. Kevin McCarthy is not Paul Ryan. He is a moderate man in terms of temperament, but not in terms of politics. And I think people shouldn't mistake the fact that he's sort of stylized and soft-spoken and does this weird breathing thing when he speaks as if he's highly trained and all that stuff. I mean, I get that. He's got, the hair's a little too nice. Something about California Republicans, they're very, particular about hair and teeth and things like that. But, okay, so he's a little bit packaged out of central casting or whatever, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be on your side.
But hey, it comes from the state of Hollywood, right? I mean, look at Newsom, whose every hair is always in place. So it's probably just a California
The first
thing.
time I met Gavin Newsom was in the green room of a show, that same show I was on in Fox in LA on Channel 11. And I just couldn't get over how perfect his teeth were. So he's like, I got to find out who does his teeth because I got to get mine done. But, it's not something that should distract us from the core point here, which is that voters elected Republicans to stop Joe Biden and to get a few basic things done. And Republicans wasted a week. Maybe they can get that back. But, we're going to be told in a matter of weeks that the debt ceiling's approaching and we're running out of time and there's a deadline and we got to get the budget passed or whatever it is. And suddenly a week that you wasted starts to look like a very valuable week because that's a week in which you could have been doing something. Now you're stuck against a debt ceiling or a budget shutdown or whatever. I mean, so I think they need to come back to square one and remember why they're there. They're not there because Matt Gaetz or Kevin McCarthy even are vital to the future of the country. They're there because what Biden and the Democrats are doing is destructive to the American constitutional experiment, and it has to be stopped. But they're not stopping it yet. They're just wasting time arguing with each other. I think they have to pull themselves together. It doesn't mean this Congress is a failure. I happen to think that number 18 is a lucky number. So, Congress number 118 could be very good. The Chicago Bears, my football team, they started the season with a win, which looked like it was a good sign. And they ended as the worst team in the NFL. They get the number 1 draft pick next year. So, sometimes you can start very well and it doesn't end up well. And likewise, vice versa. You can have a tough first week and you can pull it together. I mean, the Green Bay Packers almost made the playoffs after a 4-8 start. So, there are things that they can do to turn it around, but it's time to get serious now. And I think the Republican Party cannot allow itself to be ripped asunder by everybody who thinks that they have a mandate and that anyone who disagrees with them is part of the establishment. And unfortunately, the rules package creates more fights like this down the road. So it's going to take a lot of leadership and a lot of persuasion to keep everybody on the same team here.
Yeah, well, to your point, I mean, as a lawyer, you very much well know that there is a value in precedent. And what your actions, even if seeming like good in one particular instance, how can they be applied and manipulated in terms of rules and precedent in any other context? And so the ex ante principle is always really important when anyone, whether it's the judicial branch or it's members of Congress who are fashioning rules, you always have to be concerned about how is this rule going to be manipulated. And, when you talk about people being disruptors, there's a whole host of people that I'm seeing in the conversations, whether it's on mainstream media or Twitter comments or, just casually talking to people, at the coffee shop. People do want to see the establishment disrupted. And they liked how President Trump did it, but that doesn't mean that every member of Congress has the same authority that a sitting president of the United States in the executive branch did. And that's also important, I think, for people to remember that, Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert, if you're champions of what they did and you really support these 20, you also have to remember that they're not occupying a seat in the executive branch. They're members of Congress. And if they want to get anything done, there is going to have to be a coalition, especially with, this very, very slim majority in Congress. So Joel Pollak, I really appreciate your comments and bringing some other perspective to this. I know a lot of my listeners, have really supported the 20, but seeing this from all sides and a lot of different perspectives, I think is genuinely helpful. So in your mind, what does Kevin McCarthy have to do in order to be a successful speaker?
Well, he has to stop Democrats from forcing things through when they come down from the Senate. So Republicans have to find a way to deal with the forthcoming debt ceiling fight. They have to find a way to deal with the budget issues that are looming. And they've got to have real oversight hearings. There has to be a real spotlight shine on the FBI, on the Biden family and their corruption, on the border issues. And for example, why was the president, he was just at the border flanked by Border Patrol agents. Why hasn't he apologized for what he said about Border Patrol agents allegedly whipping Haitian migrants, which they didn't do? We need to see some accountability. We need to see the Department of Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas held accountable, whether that's through impeachment or through censure or some other mechanism to make sure that he is held liable for the disaster that's unfolded under his watch. He needs to explain to the American people, and not the way the Democrats have tried to cover for him with their hearings, but he needs to be really put to the test. And, he needs to be asked if he's on the side of the cartels or if he's trying to create a new cartel that's smuggling people into the country. He's turned the federal government into a smuggling cartel, essentially. So there needs to be some really hard-hitting stuff that people see in terms of oversight. That's the one thing Republicans can control. They can't control what the Senate does, but they can control what the House does. And look, they can also try to create a new climate. You don't need this very decentralized rules package to do that. The climate changed the moment everybody arrived on Capitol Hill last week and the metal detectors came down around the House chamber. Nancy Pelosi governed the place like a tyrant. And my fear is that Democrats will look at the Republican chaos and say, well, the only way to govern the House is the way Pelosi did, with an iron fist, where amendments aren't allowed and debate is curtailed. You want amendments, you want debate, but you also want to be able to move forward. So I think that the danger in what they're doing is they're going to strengthen the argument for a centralized speakership. And by having a radically decentralized and weakened speakership, far more decentralized than is necessary, Matt Gaetz is going to add fuel to his opponent's arguments. That's giving him the benefit of the doubt. That's if you think he really is sincere in what he's saying he wants to achieve. And maybe this is just about entertainment. If it is, then, he achieved that, but it's going to get old pretty quickly.
Well, Joel Pollak, senior editor at large for Breitbart, and also you can hear him on Sirius XM radio Sunday nights, I think at 7 p.m. Eastern. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. All right. And I've been on your show many times. Really appreciate your analysis. I always read everything that you put into Breitbart. Really appreciate your perspective. So thanks for your insights today.
Thanks, Jenna.
Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And when and we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook. You need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. All right, so lastly, I want to cover the Brunson versus Adams decision that a lot of people have asked me about. Of course, this is the lawsuit that argued that lawmakers had violated their oath of office by allegedly failing to investigate foreign election interference that allegedly rigged the election against former President Donald Trump, according to Newsweek. So Newsweek continues, the basis of this case is that the defendants, which include Congress members Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, former Vice President Mike Pence, voted to certify the 2020 presidential election after receiving a request from 154 members of Congress to investigate 6 states where there was a question of validity. So on Monday, the Supreme Court declined to consider the lawsuit. So I tweeted shortly after that, this is the right call and predicted. The Supreme Court is not the arbiter of how a member does his or her job. This is a non-justiciable issue. Imagine if a future Democrat sought removal of members for, quote, failing to investigate Trump. This would open the door to further weaponizing. So this is the right call and it is predicted. And just as I was talking with Joel Pollak moments ago, we always have to be concerned about precedent, following the Constitution, and making sure that we aren't just advocating for the preferred outcomes that we desire, but we're always staying within the confines of the rule of law. And so here, even though I agree with everyone and the plaintiff in this case, who is very upset with members of Congress for failing to investigate foreign interference, for failing to even allow debate on the House floor as robustly as it should have been in terms of the electoral certifications. All of these things should have gone according to a more robust investigatory process. However, just because that did not happen, there is no reason under the Constitution and no legal basis that the judiciary, whether it is a local court or a court of appeals or the U.S. Supreme Court, can expel a member of Congress for failing to investigate. So imagine where we would be if that was the standard. Because then if, say, a future Democrat for this new 118th Congress says, well, we are going to then sue because you failed to investigate Donald Trump over his tax returns or Donald Trump over XYZ crazy issue. If members could be expelled based on a Supreme Court subjective arbitrary determination of whether or not that member of Congress fulfilled their role in the best political manner that that individual sitting judge preferred, this would be the weaponizing of the judiciary and an oversight of Congress that the founders never intended. There is a reason why these types of political questions and these type of policy questions are termed non-justiciable. So this was my statement to Newsweek, and I just want to read this because obviously I put it in writing and very clearly. I told Newsweek the Supreme Court does not have the constitutional power to adjudicate or arbitrate every dispute, only what is legally categorized as a justiciable issue. So justiciability concerns the limits on the judicial branch to exercise its authority over a matter. So in this instance, in this case, the court system does not have the power or authority to determine whether a member of Congress is sufficiently exercising legislative oversight. Similarly, for example, the judiciary doesn't have the power or authority to determine whether a president is exercising sufficient executive authority. Who is to determine what sufficient means and what the level of proof is there? If we are using sufficiency as an arbitrary determinative outcome for a Supreme Court or any court to expel a member of Congress, that is a very, very dangerous precedent. So I continue to Newsweek. There is no constitutional requirement as a matter of law that members of Congress must conduct certain investigations or oversight. This is a matter of policy and it's discretionary. Whether the Congress should investigate a matter or failed is a political question and not an appropriate one for the judiciary. So I understand that many Americans are frustrated with Congress for its lack of oversight and investigation into the 2020 election. However, the proper remedy is not for the judiciary to determine to expel members based on political policy determinations. And the obvious reason is that any person could then ask the judiciary to expel a member for quote unquote failing to conduct investigations on any other political issues, which would only further weaponize and politicize the court system. Exactly what the political question doctrine and justiciability is designed to avoid. The remedy here is for the people to vote out members whose legislative actions they disagree with, thereby expelling them at the ballot box. Okay, so I know that the question to that is saying, well, if we don't have free and fair elections, how can that be the appropriate remedy? Well, the remedy here for election integrity, as I've continued to say on this program and will continue to say, is that the remedy lies with the state legislatures. It is your responsibility. Every single person listening to this show, you are a member of a state. And if you are an American and you are a citizen of a state, it is your responsibility to advocate for yourself for free and fair elections and for your fellow citizens at the state capitol and encourage your state legislators to enact reasonable, common sense election integrity measures, transparency, and accountability with enforcement over election administration. You also can have process where there is something that I've called borrowing from really Virginia law that's called a rocket docket. That would be an expedited process to get some of these challenges to election questions and election outcomes through the process. You don't have to worry about standing. If they fulfill certain criteria, then these election challenges not only can move forward on the merits, but then there are particularized remedies that the state law has fashioned to deal with election integrity questions. So even though I know a lot of people are very disappointed in the Supreme Court, and to be clear, they did not give a reason or rationale. They simply denied the writ of cert, which is the petition for the Supreme Court to hear the case. The Supreme Court is not obligated under the U.S. Constitution to take up any cases. So in their discretion, they simply denied that cert along with probably 200 or so other cases. They only hear less than 1% of petitions that are filed annually. So that is a very, very small number of cases. So they weren't required to give a justification, but both the lower court of appeals as well as the lower court kicked this out and dismissed this suit on the basis of standing, which I wanted to go further into the justiciability question so that people would not deem this just mere judicial avoidance. In this particular case, I do not think that this case should have been heard on the merits. It's a political question. It's one of policy that the Supreme Court and the judicial branch as a whole has no business to adjudicate or determine whether members of Congress or members of the executive branch are doing oversight or their own functions in a quote unquote sufficient manner that is an arbitrary standard that a court has no business enforcing. So disagree with me if you want, but we always have to be concerned about precedent. We always have to be concerned about the constitutional and legal standards, and we have to fight for what is constitutionally correct, right, and appropriate, not just the outcomes that we prefer. If we are outcome driven, then we are activists no better than the Democrats. I am not going to have the expense of my fidelity to the U.S. Constitution and to the rule of law at the expense of just getting an outcome I prefer. Because I guarantee you the next time that that particular issue comes up on a similar legal basis, you will be very glad that precedent is in place. Precedent is why we have the Dobbs case that overturned Roe versus Wade. And fidelity to the Constitution is how we get good opinions as well as outcomes we don't prefer. So I'm Jenna Ellis. Thanks so much for tuning in today. And as always, please subscribe wherever you are listening to the Jenna Ellis Show. You can find us on Rumble, YouTube until we're suspended again, and of course, anywhere that you stream podcasts. And you can also listen to my brand new show, Jenna Ellis in the Morning, on the American Family Radio Network at afr.net. You can download the free app. And you can also save up to 80% on MyPillow products. Support our good friend Mike Lindell using promo code Jenna. So I will see you tomorrow with more constitutional analysis from a biblical and Christian worldview. Have you ever picked up a towel set because it felt so soft in the store, but then when you leave and you go to use it, it's not really that absorbent? It's basically a towel that is leaving you out to dry. That's why MyPillow has developed the MyPillow towels that actually work. I know, it's totally mind-blowing. Towels that actually dry you. Their 6-piece towel set includes 2 bath towels, 2 hand towels, and 2 washcloths. They come in a variety of colors. I have the sage green and the white. I love them. And right now you can receive a 6-piece set for only $39.98 with promo code Jenna. That's JENNA. So go to MyPillow.com right now and click on the radio listeners special. MyPillow products come with a 10-year warranty and have a 60-day money-back guarantee. So to receive this amazing offer on the 6-piece towel set of MyPillow towels, just go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener special, and enter promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, or call 1-800-564-8475. That's MyPillow.com, promo code Jenna.